Round 6 of the candidates tournament in Moscow was very eventful. Veselin Topalov set the tone of the day by playing in this position with the white pieces pawn to h4. Now this is an anti-Grunfeld move played against Giri, of course. He's a great Grunfeld expert. Now I'm not going to go through this game. In fact, it went into a fairly orthodox Benko position after this. Giri had a slight advantage in the endgame, but he couldn't quite finish it off. That game ended in a draw. So I would like to look at Caruana against Karakin. So this was kind of the top pairing of the day, you could say. Caruana thus far on 50%. Karakin, of course, leading the tournament. Caruana played some good preparation against Karakin's Queen's Indian, and well, they arrived at this position, and there's no doubt that it's really just Caruana with the white pieces playing for the win. He has Queen against Rook, Knight and Pawn, so really only White can try and win this position. It's just a question of whether Karakin can hang on for a draw. Now, I mean, obviously, you know, with the lack of pawns on the board, Black has reasonable drawing chances. But the king is a little bit kind of exposed here. You know, g5 might happen sometimes. Sometimes you might even advance the h-pawn to kind of, you know, dislodge the bishop. The rook is on the 7th rank. White definitely has chances. Karakin played a very interesting defence here. He played pawn to d4. So giving up that knight. Now this was very carefully calculated. So now he's a queen for a rook down. But d4. And d3 played. So that pawn wants to go all the way. And now if Caruana wants to stop that, he can of course play bishop f3, but then d2, well, bringing the rook back doesn't help because of rook e1 check. It's not too good. So, well, you can play the king up, but in this position, well, Black is going to be able to draw with rook and bishop. Shouldn't be any difficulty. So Caruana here decided to break things open with g5, and now it gets very tricky. d2 from Karakin. Looks like it's going all the way. Now g takes f6 check. And here Karakin used up quite a few minutes, so he was running a bit short of time here. In fact, he might be able to take this pawn, but of course it's chancy to have your king running around the board like this, but it can probably settle on h6, for example here, and it's probably going to get back to some sort of safety. But Karakin obviously just thought, don't feel too comfortable with that. And he calculated an amazing variation here. He played king h8. Now that looks a bit risky to leave that wonderful pawn on f6. But look what happens. Bishop f3. Now instead of getting a queen here, now with the pawn on f6, that would be difficult. Karakin had foreseen this move. Bishop e4. Now this is very clever. Now let's go through a few variations. Obviously if that's taken, then you get a queen. If queen takes f7, now this gets tricky. Queen looks dire for Black, but rook g8, well, not only saves the day, prevents queen g7 mate, but suddenly rook h1 and rook g2 check threatened. Terrible. You could play bishop g4 here, but rook g8 is a strong reply, and then, well, this should be okay for Black with two rooks against the queen. So Caruana tried king h2. Now there's a tricky move. If bishop takes f3, then queen f7, and well, it's turning in White's favour. Well, that's gone completely, of course. But Karakin had foreseen this possibility and played bishop d5. So this is really tricky. Now if the queen swings across, rook g8 is a good move. And then, for example, this takes bishop e4, threatening a mate. This is very tricky, but black is all right here. It is still tricky, but if you queen, then actually white now draws. Rook down, but that's a draw by perpetual. Okay, so in this position, basically Caruana thought, okay, I'm taking no chances. Queen g4, and after this move, rook g8, he just blockaded, gave up the queen. Caruana was actually running very short of time here, and now this is just a draw. The players actually agree to draw in this position. There's not a lot to do. Neither side can make much progress. For example, king g3. Well, let's say king h7. This is the simplest way to draw. Bishop check, and the bishop comes back, and again they can repeat moves. Neither side can make any progress here. Very interesting game, and I thought Karakin, under a little bit of pressure, defended absolutely brilliantly. He was so cool under pressure. You know, he didn't get rattled at all. Well, okay, what was going on in the other games? Let me show you the shortest game of the day, which was Anand against Svidler. Well, typical Spanish. I was expecting Svidler just to maintain the tension in the position with d6. Instead, he exchanged on d4, broke with d5. Now, this is a really confusing position. But look what happens now. Anand took on b5. And here, you can take a pawn, but it's not too good. I mean, here, actually, black gets tremendous compensation for the pawn after c4. Very nice pawn majority. The queen blockades in the middle of the board. But instead of this, so let's just go back. Anand took on e4. He recaptured with the rook. Now, this is a very clever exchange sacrifice. If bishop takes e4, and this bishop is an absolute monster. As so often the case in the Spanish, it's this light squared bishop which really suddenly comes into its own. Well, I mean, black could play this in various ways, but let me show you a simple variation. If the rook moves, then white has the classic Greek gift piece sacrifice, and that's going to win. Or if rook a6, well, that will stop the sack. But queen d3 threatening to take here is very strong. If g6, simply queen takes b5. I mean, white's initiative is incredible here. And then d5, I mean, the fantastic passed pawn. So that knight not looking good on a5. So Svidler decided to play knight b3. Okay, it's getting tricky. Anand exchanged rooks. Now, if queen takes, then the rook swings across to h4, and you can see there's a threat of bishop takes h7 as well as bishop takes knight, and that's winning. You can see those bishops so often in the Spanish, you know, they're way back. One of them on their starting square is bishop on c2, but they are so powerful. I think it sort of demonstrates the incredible long-range strength of bishops. So bishop takes rook was played, and now if rook h4, then bishop takes knight, and well, you can see the queen is hitting the rook. So instead, Anand in this position played knight g5. Now this is an incredibly primitive attack, but it works. Black doesn't really have a good defense here. Again, if this rook is taken, that bishop threatens something disastrous here. And if g6, well, you just take that knight on b3. White has a winning material advantage. So knight takes bishop. Anand didn't bother recapturing. Simply queen h5, incredibly crude. Threatening mate on h7. Well, Svidler can give up the queen, but it's going to be lost eventually. Instead, he played h6, but this goes down very, very quickly. And now an excellent move from Anand. Of course, he'd foreseen all this. Rook g4, opening up the bishop's diagonal. And if pawn takes knight, then, of course, this is this very simple forced mate. Standard mechanism, and queen h7 mate, very simple. Queen a5, played by Svidler. Threatening mate in 1, but Anand had this under control. He played h4. He said after the game he'd actually seen this way back when he played rook takes e4. There you go. The old timer can still calculate very well indeed. Here Svidler resigned. Now, maybe a little bit early, but actually it is utterly lost. He didn't need to be shown how it all works. So, for example, queen e1 check. Let's just go through a typical variation. Knight e2, threatening actually check and mate, but then knight h3. Actually, this just kills it completely. Very nice retreat, but preventing queen g1 check. Black has nothing now, and now it's white's turn at the other side of the board. I mean, you can see black's pieces are just spread in the corners of the board. Threat, queen takes rook. Okay, so let's say the rook moves, queen g6, threat, queen h7. Now there are various ways to win, but let's just go with the most forcing method. I mean, this is not too difficult. You just smoke the king out. As I said, there are various moves that black can try here, but once the king is open, it's really gone. It's very simple indeed, because black's queen and knight at the other end of the board can offer no defense at all. And then, well, something like rook e4. I mean, the queen, rook, and bishop are just going to kill that exposed king. So a fantastic victory from Vishy. There was an Indian chess player who tweeted after the game. He said he quoted an old Tamil proverb: "Horse may run faster, but elephant recovers quicker." So Anand lost a bad game in round 4, but he's come back with this fantastic victory. Well, I should say in other news, Aronian defeated Nakamura. Now, this game lasted 7 hours. I'm afraid I haven't got time to go through all the subtleties of this one. In this position, Aronian played rook d7, long endgame. Now, Nakamura is suffering here, but here there were really dramatic events. Nakamura can hang on by playing rook e2. Now, Aronian claimed after the game this was winning. I'm not sure. I still have to analyse this one in detail. Perhaps I'll do this on the rest day, but Aronian still thought he was winning, but anyway, still not easy. But instead of playing the rook over to prevent the pawn to e6, Nakamura touched his king. And, well, of course, touch a piece, move a piece. He had to move the king back, but now it's incredibly easy for Aronian. So the king just comes in. Rook. Obviously, the king and pawn endgame is completely winning for white. And now, because the king is in such a good position, this is incredibly simple for white. You just advance your E and F pawns, and black's king is just squashed here. Let me just go through the final moves of the game. I mean, Nakamura looked pretty disgusted after the game, but a simple blunder, and obviously the e-pawn is just rolling through. As I said, I'll try and determine whether this rook and pawn ending was actually winning for Aronian, but in a sense it's a moot point. Aronian ground him down. So after 6 rounds, Aronian and Karakin share the lead with 4 out of 6, but Anand is back. He has 3.5 out of 6. It's getting very close.